Well, with that, let's jump right in. My hope for this, and I'll try. If I have a talk that I think I need to kind of look and see what we want to accomplish between now and when we start teaching. All of you start on the 22nd. Is that right? Yeah, is my understanding. So um, between now and then, if there's some talks, conference talks, or other readings that I'd like you to do, I'll try to get that ahead of time to you through email. And so just kind of be watching your emails for that. But for today, and really every time we come together, I just want to have this be kind of like spring training. We're going to get the ball out and we're going to take 100 swings at things and, just really practice. I want to have a real practice element and not a lot of theoretical discussion, but just really just getting into it and practicing. So here's what I'd like to talk about today is to focus on doctrines and principles. You'll have students, and I don't know how well their teachers taught them last semester, and they're sometimes at the semester change, there's new kids in new classes, there's always a little bit of turnover and change, and so I don't know what kind of teaching experience they came from. It might be different, it might be varied. Maybe their teacher really helped them understand what a doctrine and what a principle is and did a really good job of constantly identifying them. But if there's one thing that always seems to kind of rise to the surface when we go out and observe teachers, not just student teachers, but even my own colleagues, is sometimes we just get in the habit of teaching and kind of going through the lesson, but not really ever clearly identifying doctrines and principles. We want our students to walk out of our classes. If you were to ask them, hey, what was the lesson on today? Hopefully they would be able to quickly say, well, we learned a couple of really powerful principles. And one of the principles that stood out to me today was, and then they can state it, right? A nice, clearly stated principle. To where it's obvious what the principle was. What was the principle or two that you were going deep on today? And to have that clearly identified and stated. And so who in here has a good definition of a doctrine versus a principle? And this is kind of review from our 471 class that we had. How would you define it?
Doctrine is a truth,
Mm-hmm.
an unchangeable truth.
Perfect.
Where a principle is something, I guess it's a truth also, but it encourages you to apply it.
Yes.
Back on.
That's perfectly stated. I love how you said that. Both are truths. And so we don't want to split hairs because sometimes it's hard to, is it a doctrine or is it a principle? And we've mentioned this before, the brethren sometimes use these interchangeably. Some of the apostles, I think Elder Scott used to always say truths. He would just call these, now here's a truth, a precious truth, or something like that. So a doctrine is an unchanging truth, and we might add a little bit to that too. A principle, like a doctrine, is also a truth. But Elder Scott's definition, truths packaged for application. It's written in such a way that makes you want to apply it, just like Marcy said. But both are truths. So let's make sure we understand that important point. Doctrines are usually about the plan of salvation, some element of the plan of salvation, where we came from, why we're here, where we're going after this life, elements about the Godhead, their characteristics. They're statements of fact. They're not really applicable. You can't really apply it. For example, God has a body of flesh and bones. That's a doctrine about the nature of God. You can't apply that. And what are you going to do with that? It's just a statement of truth. It's just a fact, right?
Self-evident, unchanging, unrelated.
Yeah, unchanging, self-evident.
Independent of other things.
Yes. That's right. So just kind of facts, statements of truth, right? About the plan, about the Godhead. Principles, on the other hand, are also truths, but they are written in such a way that it makes you want to apply it. And you can give some examples, like we already did. The Father, has a body of flesh and bones. And then give me an example of a principle, some statement of truth that is applicable.
Wickedness never was happy.
Perfect. Alma 41:10, right? Wickedness never was happiness. So that is foundational to everything we do in class. We want our students to come out with doctrines and principles, learned, understood, and of course that teaching pattern, we want them to not only understand it, but we want them, and this is the part that sometimes we lack as teachers, we kind of just think about teaching as disseminating information. We want them to feel something about these things. We want them to really feel something. And when they feel something about these things, then they're more likely going to apply them. And so that's kind of what we're hopeful here. So, what does all this mean for the first day of class? I don't know. That first day of class, we want our students, and maybe when we get closer to January 22nd, maybe on our last little in-service class together, I'm going to have you top 10 things that just work in a class and first week ideas. You'll want to spend some time getting to know your students and letting them get to know you. Let them know what your hobbies and interests are. Tell them about your family, your growing up, what high school you went to, and your favorite flavor of ice cream or whatever, right? We want them to know you. Neil Postman is an educational philosopher. I don't know if you've heard of him before, but he said, Neil Postman said, when a student perceives a teacher to be warm, curious, and authentic, the student will learn. So there's something about being warm, curious, and authentic. So let them get to know you. Spend some time that first week, getting to know you. But the other thing I thought on that first week, maybe not necessarily day one, is to go ahead and this is what I would do every semester, even if I'm not a brand new student teacher. I would do this as a professional teacher at the beginning of every semester, is to define these two things with my students and to kind of go through just what we did. To help them understand what a doctrine and principle is and encourage them to say, this is what we want to do more than anything in classes. We want to pull out doctrines and principles. And by defining them and understanding what they are, we're going to be able to more easily recognize them. Now, there is a place in our handbook. Chad, are you in a spot with some doctrines and principle information?
Yep. So
What page?
page 5, it's under Teach 1.3, and it just goes over exactly what you were talking about. So it's not necessarily doctrine or principles, it's just exactly what you just explained.
Yeah,
Page
great.
5 just talks about under Teach.
Perfect. Thank you. Page 5, you've got President Packer quote there, and of course his famous quote that true doctrine understands behavior better than anything else, right? Understood, that is, and applied. And then principles, Richard G. Scott's quote there. Thank you. You might also put out there next to that page 5 there by those definitions, see page 26. And page 26 also has a couple more definitions there, similar again. That's where we learn the doctrine of fundamental unchanging truth. And then principles and enduring truths to rule individuals can adopt to guide them in making decisions. And then it quotes Richard G. Scott again, principles are concentrated truth packaged for application. So, all right, we're going to practice. Who wants to practice? It's our first day or first week, and you're going to teach your students about doctrines and principles. I'm going to cover this up, and I'm going to let you go for it. Any takers? Marcy,
Oh, geez.
you know this.
I'm gonna be
You already taught us, so let's do this officially. So it's the first day, and it doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be lengthy, and improvise, and if you feel inspired to do anything slightly different, sorry about all that, I don't know what that is there, but
Can I get 1 minute to?
yeah, take a minute to kind of clear the clouds, and we've already gotten to know each other, maybe this is day 2 or something.
Day 2, we're just
Yeah,
figuring out.
maybe
doctor
before class starts, just kind of,
Oh, man, okay.
I know it's putting you totally on the spot.
100%. Okay, so in the church, there are 2 very important concepts, I guess, that we need to learn so that we can really get the most out of our scriptures and really get the most out of this class. And those 2 principles that I think we need to learn would be what a doctrine is and what a principle is. Does anybody have an idea right off the bat what a doctrine would be? What a definition for doctrine would be?
Oh, Marcy, when I hear doctrine, I think of unchanging. Something that's eternal, doesn't really change.
Okay. Anybody else have anything you want to add to that? Okay. The only thing I would add to that would be an unchanging or eternal truth. So I would just add the word truth to that. What about principle? Does anybody have an idea what principle would be? What the definition of principle would be?
The principle is kind of like a doctrine, except for a principle you can apply.
Okay.
So, Elder, I believe, it was Elder Richard G. Scott. No. Yes, Richard G. Scott. Yes, he taught that principles are truth packaged for application.
Okay. Sorry, truth, what package, that's right. Okay, with these definitions, can you see how important it would be to understand what we're looking for every time we read a chapter? If we're searching for the doctrines and the principles in every single chapter, we're going to get so much more out of our scriptures. And we'll start to understand what it is Heavenly Father means for us personally to get out of each chapter.
All right, great. Time out now. Good job. So let's talk about what our students will know. Now, we've been trained a little bit and that kind of a thing. And so that's part of this. Is let's just see what this would look like, and then let's adapt it to our real classes. How well do you think they'll have as far as definitions on doctrines or principles?
They won't give the definition
No.
until we discuss it.
Yeah.
You get the handbook.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got the handbook. They don't have a handbook. They might have their teacher teach them these things, and they might go to their scripture journals and say, "Hey, Brother Keeley taught us this last semester," or whatever. And so they might. I don't know, but I'm guessing they probably won't have a real good definition. There's nothing wrong with just saying, here's a couple of important concepts that I want you to understand. That's going to be a foundation for everything we do this semester. In fact, I'd like you to take notes on this. It's just a couple of things here. We've got a doctrine and a principle, and here's their definitions. There's nothing wrong with that either. So we don't have to have them make something up or try to guess what those things are. So maybe anticipate that they probably won't have a good, solid understanding of those definitions. Now, what could Sister Tolis do at this point to help them see examples of that?
I was just gonna say, experiences in scriptures that really point out a principle or doctrine. A good one with the doctrine is the first vision, right? What did we
Yeah.
learn from that? That God, Jesus, and Holy Ghost are separate, right? That's the Godhead, right? And then a principle, wickedness never was happiness. Maybe use a couple of examples in the scriptures to help you see.
Okay, Marcy, we're in tag team. Matt's gonna come up and show us that very thing.
Alrighty, a couple of things that I thought that you did really good, Marcy. First, off the fly, first time.
Yeah,
you're fantastic. Is that you said you helped create, kind of an environment that we wanted to understand why these are important. You said, we're gonna learn something that's gonna help us get the most out of this class. Ears up, people go, oh, this is something that's gonna make this class better. Then you said, these are things that help us get much more out of the scripture. So you did some good things that help to cultivate the learning environment that makes the kids want to perk up and say, oh, this is really important. And then you did something really good. You identified, and then you said, hey, we got to help understand. So you said, here's the Godhead. Fantastic. So first couple of real good principles of learning, identifying and understanding.
You saw it right there, huh?
Yeah, right there.
Thank you, Chad.
Okay.
Good job, Marcy.
Good job, Marcy. Okay, now that we've understood what a doctrine and principle is, can anybody think of an example in scriptures where it points out clearly a doctrine? Or, a past event that we've learned about in church history? You think of a clear doctrine.
I think of like Doctrine and Covenants. I think it's 88. I'd have to get there, but it talks about the plan of salvation. And it gives us some outlines of what the plan of salvation is. Kind of matter of factly, this is what the kingdoms are like. But it doesn't give any necessarily, we don't have to have an application. This is what it is. It's not going to change, right? Here's the celestial kingdom, the terrestrial and the telestial. So I think, is it 77 or 88?
76.
76. Hey, pretty close.
Perfect.
So you get doctrine.
You get actual
This is
doctrine.
what it's like.
Right. So if we look over here at these different concepts that God had, the plan of salvation, restoration, they really are just unchanging eternal truths, right? So do you see how that differentiates itself from the principle, which I like to think of an action item, something you can apply. You can't really apply the Godhead, right? Okay, now let's talk about principle. Can anybody think of a principle that you love in scriptures?
I think it's something similar, Matt, with if we're talking about the plan of salvation, then, how does the plan of salvation apply to us? What principles are necessary for us to achieve this doctrine? And I like what you said. You introduced feeling. What's a principle that you like?
Right.
Yeah, that you
Right.
love.
You think one,
One,
Rachel?
yeah, one that just came to
Okay.
mind to me was in Matthew chapter 16, in verse 20 about faith. But also in verse 21, he says, howbeit this kind goes not perfect prayer and fasting. It gives us an application right there that we can have the faith to move mountains through prayer and fasting.
Wow. Awesome principle. Thank you, Rachel. Let's open up, everybody open their scriptures to that right there. Instead of chapter 17.
Matthew chapter 17, verses 20.
Okay, great. You say that again, Rachel, and let's mark that scripture and write it inside of your scripture there. You say that again. I love that. Faith to move mountains. Maybe not, you don't have to read the scripture,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the actual principle.
So if we, through prayer and fasting, we can have.
Wow, powerful. Thank you.
I'm in Matthew 7. What was the reference?
Verses 20 and 21.
Faith to move mountains. Great, thank you. Appreciate those examples.
Good job. All right.
Yeah.
Let's
That's
talk
great.
about that. What did you guys see that was good and helpful?
Well, definitely the examples kind of get you thinking about your own experiences and scriptures that you feel relate to you. that'll help kind of drive home what the doctrinal principles mean. So it's easier to pick up
Yeah.
when you're reading through.
Right. How helpful was it for him to stop and pause and say, hey, let's all turn there? And what did that do for you, Rachel, when he did that?
It validates.
Big time.
Good.
Big time. So we want to do that. And I love how you also encourage them. What did he ask you to do with that principal statement that you came up with?
So write it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this a lot. Thank you, Matt. Nice job. I'm going to say this a lot. You'll hear it a lot. Friendship, what's the difference between a friend and an acquaintance? Have I had this conversation
You had it
with
with me.
Matt, what's the difference?
Time.
That's it. The difference between a friend and someone that's just an acquaintance really is time. You spend time with your friends. You get to know them on a deeper level. You know about them, what their interests are, what their hobbies and likes are, because you spent time. An acquaintance, you don't really know those things because you haven't spent time with them. We want our students to become friends with the scriptures. Richard G. Scott talks about the scriptures becoming friends, that principles, these truths can become friends that they can call on because they've spent time with these truths. They can call on them in their time of need to rescue them. Isn't it a little cold in here? A little bit. Let me just turn that thing and see if it does something. And I think it's time for us to put a stop and then another recording here. So let me, this free version only lets us record 40 minutes at a time.